Warm welcome this morning to Monday morning, 26. There's been lots of activities going on, as we know, with lots of changes and lots of challenges. And we're still on the kind of Davos, because obviously Davos is still there. Um, and we'll talk a little bit about trade power. You've seen it. You've seen how they all discuss the EU. Obviously, each leader, even a bit of AI, and Davos brings a lot of things together. But actually, if you listened, I managed to listen to a lot of the talks from different nationalities and different countries and everything else, and it goes around trade. So trade is one of the most fundamental things and it structures everything. So again, structural trade power, compliance. We're seeing a lot more compliance and a lot more, you know, structure there with traceability and where goods are coming from. Obviously, we're hoping there's going to be some ceasefire, as we say, in Ukraine and Russia, and hopefully that'll start to ease a little bit of tensions within the trade markets. But obviously, not just that, you've got the US. Obviously, we had the discussions on Greenland and then the changes there, and then the backtracks, and then the EU fighting, obviously standing the ground, and the poor little UK just sitting in the middle of everything as usual. No real strong back power there from the UK. We just sit in between the EU and the US, not wanting to upset anybody. We have no real structure and no real power, even though we're the fifth or sixth global player. Quite frustrating, but that's trade. And, unfortunately, we put ourselves in that position. We have to be a bit more stronger. Davos, what shifted? So controls of trade infrastructure, physical and digital infrastructure. Digital was coming in. It was interesting to listen to Elon Musk talking about AI and how the shift and how that's going to be a lot quicker. Anybody in AI, as people know, I'm in AI and I've been creating programs myself and writing programs I can code, I can do lots of things. It's interesting what you can do now and how you can help businesses. So you're going to see a lot of good things coming out of AI. Some bad things will always come out of that, but actually a lot of good things. And what we're trying to do is give you them tools to help you. We're looking at AI constantly and seeing where we can support businesses, etc. Data credibility and trust, again, them flows, banks will be under a lot more pressure now. Banks, shifting money, how money's exchanged, currencies, all these things will have an interest impact in the next, I would say, in the next year. And BRICS, we talked about on Friday, again, understanding BRICS and the challenge that BRICS brings to the Western world, as we would say, because it puts a lot of pressure on currencies and other things. And that could have an effect. And again, be interesting to see. Route access and resilience, we're seeing that alternative pathways, it can be, trade lanes can change, air freight and is the most reliable and safe because obviously it's going from airport to airport. And normally trailers within Europe are going from, road transport going from one place to another. But when you go on to sea freight, which is probably, we've covered this and we'll cover a little bit more detail so we can give you kind of better understanding. But ocean freight accounts for a huge amount of traffic that goes out of the UK and comes into the UK. So you can imagine, and unfortunately, you're in them trade lanes where there's a real challenge because if something gets switched off tomorrow, your goods don't particularly move as quick. And we found that certainly with the move to the Land of Good Hope, where obviously it was being rerouted. It put 2 weeks on transport, it costs more money, etc. So again, it's that flexibility and that supply chain exposure and vulnerability that we're seeing in the market. Again, it's no longer neutral, as we've clearly seen last week. Which moves first, as we say. So shared routes as strategic assets, we know that. Compliance is embedded upstream and platform and carry shape access. So digital platforms, with I understand digital platforms inside out. So I know what's happening. I know how it works and I'm building it myself. So it's not once you understand the flows and the difference is, I always say, when it's people like myself or anybody else, is what people want. I've spent 30 years of this in transport and then the last 10, 15 years constantly seeing customers. I'm a trainer, traveling around the world doing different training. Everybody has the same issues, working in the US, working in Qatar, working in Saudi, working in Europe, Lithuania, Switzerland, Spain, Italy. I know what's going on. So when I'm building a platform, I know exactly what you want. I'm not telling a programmer then this is what I want. I'm actually doing the programming myself. That makes it a lot easier because it makes the system a lot easier to understand what you want it to do and how you want it to improve. Not just a pure center that gives you the information, but how many people, I'm as guilty as everybody. I buy these apps to go on them and I haven't got a clue how to use them. They're so complex. And even when I built the website, I mean, some of these plugins are just so complex to use. It's like, who writes these things? There's no common sense or anything. So, what I built was common sense and how to use it. You press a button, it does what you ask it to do. It's one of my big frustrations, a lot of technology. I'm sure they make it harder because just to make it harder so everybody can't use it and then you want that support. We're not here for that. We're here to help you to expand that market and give you the global opportunities. Will it ever see the light of day with the big organizations like the governments? You've no chance. It's too embedded. They'll do whatever they want to do. It's not about supporting businesses. They have other, you know, I don't know, structures and things in place that they're going to be doing. That's up to them what they do. But it'd be interesting. But we're going to concentrate a little bit this week on the World Customs Organization. There's some big changes coming in 2028, but they're focusing a lot on digital. When I was a board member last year with a Lithuanian company who'd gone into digital, great digital system they were using. And obviously I've been in AI for a long time in digital since 2019. Dave was invited to the WCO, and I was watching, it's a shame that, WTO don't take companies like small companies seriously. But it was interesting what they were doing. And the WCO was really starting to talk digital last year. So this is nothing new. Custom systems, data-driven risk targeting, technology, preparing members. So again, it's going down that digital format. But again, we need the tools that people can use very easily. If you're global trade, then what's the biggest challenge here? We know the barometers, all the studies tells us that your biggest challenge is bureaucracy. It's understanding documents, documentation. We've created that. So let's hopefully that people can use it and it'll minimize a lot of this. But the WCA are looking at this and transfer. So, from paper-based processes to full digital environments, that creates a challenge in itself because we all like to have that bit of paper, don't we, to thing. And I found that very difficult in 2020 working for a US company where they were like, we only do paperless. And they were like, wow, how does that work? And getting used to it, but you do get used to it. But the problem is it's all sat in flows, but what happens then to me, this is just my concern, what happens then when people say, what's your cybersecurity? What happens if you get hacked or anything? What other things have you got in place? So it's like going down this paperless and everything else, but what backup have you got? It always worries me. I mean, no interest to somebody to come to me to hack, but I wonder how these big data companies go on. It must cost a fortune keeping that away. There's lots of great tools, don't get me wrong, because I'm using them that give you that security. But again, it just always makes me wonder. And I'd love to hear from you of how you keep your data safe if you're paperless. I'm just curious. It's not a criticism of anybody. Anyway, so I'm just curious just to see, and maybe we can talk about that on one of the next presentations we do, or how different countries adopt this digital format. Digital is the way forward. There's no question. And yes, it's an old school with that paper, but it does give you that little bit of anything happens. Yeah, you still got to go and get it. You still got to uplift it and everything else. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what tools are out there that really give you that security. If Marks and Spencer's, Jaguar, if all these can get hacked with all the investments they spend, there's a little bit of a worry though, isn't there? That at what level do you keep everything? And it'd be quite interesting to see when Marks and Spencer's and Jaguar got recently. And there was a company in the US, I remember it clearly when I was working for the US company who was hacked and it took them months and it cost them millions. These, when they get hacked, it doesn't just switch off and off it goes tomorrow. So again, there's some big challenges there. So again, future risk on the HS, new classifications, product use focus, data enforcement. Again, key insights, HS risk begins. Not in 2028, so let's get ourselves prepared. We're already seeing that. There's a lot more audits now in the UK. And preparation time is compressing. So again, 2020, we all talked about Brexit, didn't we? And waited and waited and waited, and then it was upon us. We all talked about CBAM. It's coming. It's here. It comes very quickly, doesn't it? Which is quite fine, as you get older. Um, Every year it seems to like, God, how quick is it going? It seems to just fly by, doesn't it? And before you know it, you're ready for retirement, as you're saying. So inside our daily trade briefing, every day we track. So we track everything. So global trade power shifts, compliance, logistics, market demands, trade history patterns. We're watching all this all the time, and then we're trying to give you what we think is the latest news for you. Again, modern trade failure points, most disruptions in internet don't happen at customs. They're normally, and we don't mean that, there's no challenges there, but normally it's the paperwork. Normally it's already going to be flagged, snagged, should I say, before it even arrives at border. Border are only doing what they do. It's a computer, it's systems. Unless they do a random check, which is, it's very unlikely that happens, but it does happen where they do a random check. But normally they will check because there's something wrong in that paperwork. So it's already been flagged. So again, understand that. It's very important to understand what your risks are as a company, because if you don't, again, data doesn't align, classification origin is wrong, responsibility is unclear. Again, that Incoterms, understanding that Incoterms issue, service after booking, why this happens or why this matters, because it costs you money, it costs you a fortune. If you actually look at, and this is what I was saying, when we did last week on the book with data, I found that quite interesting because we have all the data, but we just never use it or we don't know how to use it. And that's what we're going to try and push out is you have the data. If you're investing huge amounts of money on your computer systems and everything else, that data must be there. So you need to speak to your thing and see how you can extract that data and give it the information you need, because something might be stirring you in the place. I find this when I'm doing data. I go on and on with myself sometimes with, oh, it's not done this, it's not done that, because obviously I'm doing channels, I'm doing, I'm trying to get lots of news out. I'm a trainer, I'm trying to keep up to date with everything. And I convince myself sometimes, and then I get the data and actually I'm way off because the data is telling me very clearly what's actually happening. So we're all guilty of it. It's a new phenomenon that we have to get used to, and use your data that you have. You'll know whether your documentation is correct or not, by just checking it. Again, stay with us this week. We've got Davos signals turning into action, WCO, we've got the HS2 we're going to keep an eye on, and compliance becoming market access. We're going to concentrate on the WCO. We're going to see what that brings, and there might be some interesting stories coming out of that. And we'll keep you up to date. It's very important. So again, thanks for joining us today. We try and keep them short and sweet. We don't want to kind of we know you're all busy and busy lives, but again, we'll keep you up to date. The newsletter now is delivered every day, but we're going to put it onto the YouTube channel, what you're watching. So going to post, it'll be in there. Again, we'll try and work out the best way to do that. But we've been absolutely amazed when we started the newsletter at 11 o'clock, and we changed the times because again, so don't be thinking we've changed things, because we look at things, we look at when's the best time to produce things. And it was interesting actually when we did the newsletter, the format, you never know if a format works. A lot of work goes into that. Don't just assume that it pings. There's a lot of work, that research and everything else that you're already building into our tools. But what we found is in the last probably since certainly after Christmas, we were starting to get a real pattern of the newsletter going out. And this is what people don't tell you. It might go out to 600 people, but actually how many people open it and read it. And I looked at that, condensed it again. I looked at the data, I looked at who was looking at it. I thought, well, if you're not looking at it, there's no point in having it. I'm sorry. If you're not interested, you're not looked at it, let's take you off the list, because all I'm doing is sending you an email, which isn't really for you, and you're not going to read it. So why pester you? And we got down to about 420, I think, on the newsletter. And interesting, in the last, I would say, and we'll show you the data. I mean, it's very clear. In the last 4 weeks, we're consistently hitting over, I think, around 48% of people, and the tractions and everything else in there. So people enjoy reading the newsletter. So this is why we're going to home in. Hopefully you'll start to get used to this and enjoy. And we're going to start putting that newsletter in different places so you have access to read it. There's a lot of information on there. Good information, some fun on there as well. We've done some fun little topics on there. And again, we'll look at the data, all different topics each day. The news channel, we just home in on certain information. So again, thanks for joining us. Again, we'll put the newsletter in the channel. So again, have a look in your post, and I'll find another way how we can post that, whether we do it on a video content or a slide content. I'm not quite sure yet. But again, everything's new. We've only been delivering the channel for not even 2 weeks yet. So again, it's new, and we'll keep adapting. So again, thanks for joining us, everybody, and hopefully you'll enjoy today. Again, let us know. Let us know what you think. It's very important. If you don't tell us, we don't know what we're doing about. We get some lovely emails, I must say, our people. So thank you for the people who do take the time out, send us these emails. It's much appreciated. And again, make some comments if you want. So thanks for joining us and have a good